Hi, I'm Gianluca Fiorelli and welcome back to the third session. Today, our guest comes from Canada and she is the CEO of Gray.co, an SEO data and market intelligence company based in Stratford, Ontario. And she writes on website, a new SEO magazine like Search Engine Land, a wonderful post a few weeks ago about how to really measure and use Google Search Console and other tools in order to really measure the efforts of SEO. And she is also collaborating with Women in Tech SEO. And this great guest is Tory Gray. Hi, Tory, how are you doing?
Wonderful. Thank you for the lovely introduction, and it's wonderful to be here.
Oh, well, it's wonderful for me to have you as a guest. So, how SEO is treating you in this crazy
Oh my.
year 2025 and beginning of 2026?
Yeah, I think like everyone else, SEO is kind of a lot right now. I think we're all in it together as we figure out how it's evolving and how it's not evolving and how we support that. So I think it is frankly a fascinating time. And I think I'm intrigued at the possibilities of the future, and I think SEO is still quite relevant in terms of, from my perspective, whether AI takes off or not. Our job is helping bots and computers understand and contextualize and transform information, right? For new contexts, for new users in new places. So we do work through the intermediary of a bot to help grow visibility. And I think that that's true no matter where it is. And so it's been both challenging and invigorating, frankly, to figure out and learn these new things.
Yes, indeed. I like when you said we are the intermediator between the business and the bots because it makes me remind of something that is returning a lot in the conversation lately, which is the human in the loop. In terms of business and digital marketing, we can be considered the humans in the loop between the business and the agents, especially if we consider LLMs and not just LLMs, it's the future of agentic search. So, as an agency, so with your clients, how do you lived the past year 2025 from initial disruptive what can we do in conclusion to an assessment of what was happening and reassuring the client and finding the right way to work. Not forgetting classic SEO, obviously, but working also with this new frontier of AI search.
I think mostly we're along for the ride with them. So Great works primarily with embedded teams. So whether those are eng teams or SEO teams, they are smart people who are in-house that know their business really well and, are in it in the details so much. And they sometimes can use some help getting more context from the outside world. As an agency, as someone who sits outside of things, we have the benefit of seeing how other clients learn and react things. We have the benefit of keeping up maybe a little bit more in the day to day of how those things evolve and really marrying that insight to how that will impact potentially their business. So we work to bring them that insight and help them understand and help them have conversations with themselves and with their bosses as needs be to set expectations, to understand how we're going to measure things in this new world, to understand where things are working and where there are gaps. So, for instance, what does your business do? And does ChatGPT understand that? Right. And I think there's also some very interesting kind of technical barriers because we focus a lot on the technical aspects of SEO. We just love that. And I think AI bots are no exception to that rule where there are challenges of how they get and absorb information in order to supply that to the LLM tech. So we've been focusing a lot through that and frankly experimenting and learning and growing and helping them improve their visibility and also just understand where they are. Because to some extent, I think we all know it is a black box and there's things we can't know and we can't even measure visibility in a predictable way. And it's innovating every day. And clicks aren't great, right? Like through these platforms. Though I will say for some of our bigger brands, I think that that's not always the case. It feels a bit like a winner takes all. Whoever's the big Goliath in the room might get a substantial amount of clicks from LLM providers, and less so anyone else who's not in that first tier. So that's anecdotally interesting data, I think, of where things are going in this world.
Yeah, yes, this is something that I also notice with my clients, and it is really how much somehow it's a mix of classic online reputation management, how the LLMs are citing and mentioning you based on the things they know about you. So this is substantially, it can be positive, it can be neutral, and it can be sometimes something very below page two, facing immediately on LLM. And on the other hand, it's also true what you were saying, but because this is a confirmation of what I was saying too, that yes, if in classic SEO, even if I don't really like the classic definition, it was a game between the 10 blue links because some servers weren't even 10, whereas we were 6 or 7. But it's a game of few, so it's a really hard game. So maybe in this case, it's really about how to understand the true nature of the business and so how to put in the right field of battle, let's say, the brand instead of making the brand fighting all the battles. Instead of, let's say, if it was SEO, instead of fighting for all the SEO topical sphere, let's call it so, service sphere, the one that really is the USP of the brand. So maybe this is a good way to start gaining traction and then acquiring the
Absolutely.
visibility.
It is very much based in SEO, and yet there's so much omni-channel marketing involved, and there's so many things outside of SEO,
Yeah.
and I think it's on us to be good cross-functional workers and good collaborators as team members to explore whether it's PR or digital PR, whether it's affiliate marketing, whether it's paid search, whether it's content marketing and figuring out how to make sure we frame things correctly and showcase the use cases, the edge use cases that will help users show up in the personalization. I think it's such a broad strategic effort. And if we try and think of it as just SEO, like in terms of the broader argument of like, what do we call this new discipline? Like, I don't care, but I do care about innovating and exploring and frankly making sure that companies understand that it's not a box I can check by myself. It's us working with your other teams. It's being a great brand. It's being out there in the world. It's having good users that talk about you and being all of these multifaceted things.
Yeah, yes. About the name, just a little note. I usually say that I call it as the client call it. I mean, it's not a problem for me. I know what it is, in my opinion, but it's my opinion. I don't want to waste time in semantics, which is quite ironic, talking about semantics. I can even call it Mickey Mouse if the client call is Mickey Mouse. It's not. But yeah, you were saying about the importance of the renovated importance of omnichannel. So which is lead me, okay, you as an agency, surely you're covering many aspects, even if you are a senior SEO agency. So how much has increased the collaboration with maybe, let's say, just an hypothetical situation, your clients, your brands, as you as your SEO agency, but also as another agency doing things like email marketing, social media marketing, and so on. How much this cross-channel collaboration with other or professional working with your client has increased because of this need of really working in synergy between channels.
Great question. I'd say it's something, frankly, we've been working on for several years. And I think there's broader insight into the fact that is important and meaningful and worth the investment today versus what it has historically. So if people know that that's important, they can invest in that, right? They can take the time to make sure there's budget allocated and that they have the right team members in the room to do that right collaboration. But my background is that I have worked in house. I have been the single SEO running things and organic growth as a whole, and working directly with Eng, working with product, working with marketing and the content creation and editorial teams, working with the strategists. So that's always been in my DNA, simply because I was lucky enough to land in an environment where that's how I learned how to do it. And I learned how powerful a community that supports your brand and loves you and talks about you, how meaningful that is, and how important brand is in today's SERPs. Like, I don't think it'll shock most people that work in SEO to realize like brand matters. Users will click on listings of brands that they're familiar with because they already have an association with them. And that is a core advantage. And if you're not that brand, you're going to have to take certain other steps in order to articulate that brand and help people know and become aware of and appreciate and understand the value propositions of that brand. And you might have to compensate in other areas in order to make up for that as you're growing and defining those things and evolving over time. Yeah, I mean, in summary, I don't think it's changed tremendously who we're collaborating with. I think it might mean we're doing that somewhat more effectively with more organizational buy-in, that's meaningful.
Oh, interesting. I want to return a little to the topic of technical SEO. You said that Gray.co as an agency is really strong on technical SEO because you like it. Okay. I want you to ask the same question that I asked to you, Jamie Indigo, in a previous conversation I had with her. Very technical topic that content SEO usually don't even consider, which is log analysis. So let's talk about log analysis, this new generation of bots from LLMs, both for training, both for grounding, and so on. What kind of discoveries, let's call so, you have found when you were eventually analyzing the server logs and in relation to these kind of bots? Do you discover some kind of patterns or not? Maybe there are no patterns.
There are definitively patterns. I love log files. I think they're super fun. I think they've been underrated for years. And I think that, especially with who we work with, which is typically enterprise orgs. So when you have enterprise scale and enterprise traffic volume, meaningful little tweaks can provide meaningful changes, right, to your performance overall. So understanding, measuring logs, determining where those search bots, which pages are they accessing, which pages are they not accessing, how frequently are they accessing that, which status codes are they hitting when they do that? Do those change over time? Not in terms of like crawl budget or however you want to define that, more in terms of simply just crawl optimization. If you have a cap of like how much time any bot is willing to spend crawling your site, are you sending the right signals? For example, in your internal linking about which pages matter to you. And so through the years, we've done experiments to alter and update internal linking to make sure we're sending clear signals. Because sometimes we're like, whoops, we have 14 case studies, but only 2 service pages, and we link everywhere to all the case studies all the time. So Google's spending 70% of the crawl budget crawling these pages that we were looking at in analytics, like certain case studies mattered a lot more to their customers than others. So maybe there was an overemphasis on linking to things that weren't meaningful to users. And so we had a disconnect, right? Of what those were. So we could use the log file analysis in order to make tweaks, change links, change access, change the robots.txt file, ensure that they're not getting caught in like little snags and steps and like crawl traps that can create issues. Those things have always been true. In terms of the LLMs, I can't speak to that too much, unfortunately. It's a little bit proprietary, and that's something we're like actively exploring. But I'd say some of the things that I find most fascinating in this world overall are still what pages are they accessing? And further, which bots are accessing which pages. So, which different AI bots from which different LLM tools, right? Is it ChatGPT? Is it Anthropic, Claude, et cetera, et cetera? Like which bots are accessing which pages at which frequency? And further, when we have that data, so ChatGPT has multiple bots, right? So is it a user accessing your site through a live search, or is it an AI bot that is just collecting data for potentially future training content updates? And so understanding that data, doing correlation analysis, trying to like what is the connection? How does that impact your results? I think as an industry, we're all actively exploring and understanding that, but I think there's a lot of juicy stuff to be seen specifically for logs.
Yeah, yes. In fact, because I do a lot of technical SEO too, but I'm more because of my history, personal history, more prone to things like ontologies, architecture, and content organization, and so on. What I found fascinating when analyzing logs was okay, let's see what are the pages that the LLM insists to, especially when it comes to the training, insist to visit, and what are not, and try to figure out why, the whys. So, which is a good way to do a sort of, let's call it, both as content assessment. So assessment made from the bot. And usually it's also interesting to then put all these things, these kind of big sheet on Google Doc, and then feed it to an LLM with your hypothesis and make it working and chatting with it, which is quite common for me because being a solo consultant, usually my sparring partner tend to be or friends to whom I can ask things and conversate without citing names or in the privacy of the conversation, or my fellow Padawan model of a situation, which can be depending on what I want to do, or ChatGPT, or Claude, or Gemini. I also discovered, and I think you also discovered this too, that each model is good for one thing specifically, not for all, but for everything. I imagine that your clients usually ask you, okay, we are working for having all this great visibility, but where is my traffic? How did you explain the ranking of traffic? Because usually we say, okay, traffic is shrinking, but it has better quality, higher intent, and so on. But this can be good for, let's say, B2B, for B2C, e-commerce, OTAs, travel website, classified whatsoever, brands that have a clear transactional and conversion field. But I don't know if it's your case, if you have clients in the publishing. What about traffic volume? How can you explain without being depressing?
I mean, I think being frank and straightforward and honest with people is really important, frankly. I think a key advantage I have here is that I am working with teams that already know this. So I'm not bringing them insight. They know they're losing traffic and they know they're not the only ones. I can help contextualize that data and help them understand how much are they losing, how relative to the benchmarks of what's shared out there publicly. We can dive deep into their analytics and we can understand, if it's a service business or a product business, is revenue strong? Are sales and marketing qualified leads holding strong? And so can we peel apart these metrics and understand, is traffic shrinking or are business metrics and results shrinking? And I don't want to underpin, like, I think sometimes as an industry, we can be a little bit flippant about what the loss of traffic means to these brands, if I'm honest. So, how many people are going around chanting on stages right now that traffic is a vanity metric and it doesn't matter? If you're a publisher, you beg to differ. And frankly, I also think that matters for brands in pipelines. So, by that, I mean, if you don't have users clicking through to your site and you're not answering top of funnel questions, if they're not getting introduced to you as a brand, your brand awareness is shrinking. So I do set expectations now that like maybe conversions are holding strong now, but we should be diversifying and planning for a future where maybe that's not the case because we have lost a key means or reduced to some degree a key means of growing that awareness. Because if users are getting the answer from an AI overview or an AI mode, and what if our answer is there, but it's hidden behind different applications of how Google shows that? But I've seen that be you are the cited, linked, referenced brand, but it is a gray button with a little link. They never see your name. They don't know that's from you. They didn't click through to your site. You don't have any sort of tracking information. You can't show ads to them based on that. You have not controlled the experience of the user to the same degree, anything. So again, I think that there is a real issue here of our future conversion rate. And I think we can be a little too short-sighted about, hey, but conversions are strong now. Will they remain that way? I have my doubts based on my knowledge from brand teams that I've worked with. But then that means we can plan accordingly. If we can have realistic expectations, we can start to understand where in other channels can we compensate for that? How can we get creative and innovative and support that? And frankly, how can we work to maintain as much traffic and as much conversions as possible? How can we lay the groundwork? And I think it's true that brands and budgets will and are shifting to some degree away from SEO. But I also think there's plenty of brands that already are driving significant volume and have never put a lot of work towards that. So as they lose traffic, they're wigging out and they want to figure out what they can do to maintain that traffic for as long as possible while they diversify in other means. So like, let's not pretend that that's not meaningful for many enterprise and smaller companies as well.
True, true, true. And this is making us returning to the omnichannel topic. I remember where you also in LinkedIn, you were advising about escaping the SEO silo. So that's substantially mean maybe changing the mindset from SEO as a synonym of Google search, but as many people, one fishing included, thinking of SEO as search everywhere optimization. So optimize for the search experience surface search can be performed. And how you, as as Tory Gray, so as someone loving SEO, but also as an agency, started to explore and act in gaining organic visibility in other surfaces than Google. So 3 years ago, I remember the classic red alert. We TikTok is the new search environment for the Generation Z data and so on. So how are you expanding your SEO to these other surfaces?
So again, because we are working with these embedded teams, we have the luxury of like working with smart people that are innovating in this space, being an SEO stakeholder and bringing our needs and requirements and recommendations to the table, and conversely, hearing and understanding theirs. So I think one of the more straightforward ones is really understanding, frankly, what's always been out there, which is that people don't like search as many things. It also involves discovery, and Google has specific services like Google Discover, obviously a little on the nose there, right? For finding things that they didn't specifically seek in the first place. TikTok is fabulous for that. Whether you're in your space because you're following creators who, I don't know, really love recipes. But then you can see the new trending recipes. But like, let's not pretend that wasn't happening on television, in cooking shows, and in magazines, and not all these other places. It's again brought a greater appreciation that search was never confined to Google. And we can and should be better and smarter about working across the broad marketing experience, the user experience as they move through this world and understand these things. But again, if it's a TikTok, I think working with advertising teams, regardless of whether that's on a TikTok or a Reddit or a TV ad or a digital ad, creating awareness, creating interest, emphasizing brand needs, showcasing new use cases, creating interest that then turns into searches. So those might be brand searches, those might be named products that your business offers. That could be a concept that is associated with your brand. So when people are, I don't know, maybe say you're a new pasta brand and you're on shelves in supermarkets and you want them to buy from you and not someone else. Like, what is your use case? What are the applications? What are the delicious ways to consume that? I think you can share that information on TikTok and then have people look you up for, again, for your brand, or perhaps for your brand plus pasta. Isn't that nice? Because suddenly you have some brand association and Google like is really putting together that this is how people see you, and that people are seeking you because Google will want to put you at the top when that happens. So again, it's so much broader and it's always been broader. But I think we get in the room more successfully and can do a better job being strategic and testing and learning together about how to make that system more effective and return more for the business.
Yes, and that's why maybe the real hidden reason why Google recently started to add the branded queries filter or search console and also the social media view because I mean even Google was the one who invented the concept of messy middle one what you were saying the discovery is what Google defined as the trigger that makes someone wanting to search something. But I think and I want to confirm my idea with your understanding. Don't you think that also this new way of branded query filter, which if you read in the documentation of Google, is not just a very sophisticated regex, but it's also presenting, I don't know, products that it consider are brand for you. And then the social media view combined, don't you think that this is the definitive declaration from Google that we really are living in the dreams, not in the entity space now, in everything related to search, because brand is an entity and is the super entity of a business.
Yeah. I think Google is very smart and very intentional. And I think they're very good at introducing features that benefit them and their users and tell a story about what they want to be in the world, what they want people to believe, whether that's true or not. In actuality, they are ultimately a big corporation filled with a lot of different people who believe different things and feel different ways. It's like an ecosystem of people that feel different ways. So like you can think of like Google as this huge entity, but also it's a lot of separate people. And hard to say which way they're going, but yes, I think Google cares about those things. And I also think it's important just the context for us SEOs, because there were plenty of SEOs I saw complaining about the new features because they want features that are not deployed. And I think it's just important to remember that we're not always the target audience.
No,
Um,
no.
and Google speaks to many, many, many consumers. And
In fact, I want
it's
just to
okay.
make to let's put a note. They never created a subdomain SEO.google.com. But the SEO subdomain is the dev.google.com. If they want to talk to somebody, let's say in more plain English language, surely they are not SEO, or they can be eventually true developers, so the one creating the apps, and businesses with the keyword, which is the blog for everything search, is talking to businesses, not to people like marketers, technical marketers like uh, SEO. And usually, yes, there is more things about paid search than organic
Mhm.
search or AI search. Yeah,
Benefits
yeah,
them.
this is, and I mean, historically, Search Console was webmaster tool. We never be the true target. They needed to invent people talking to SEO. They are not, and I think it's not the case that they are not in the States. In Zurich, all the people talking to SEO are not in Mountain View. they are in the Zurich office
That is
of
very
Google.
interesting.
And talking about, let's say, content, there is one thing that is really, really driving me crazy lately, which is, okay, if all the informational content is especially used by AI, not just Google, but all the AI models to create synthetic answers that are not sending us traffic, why we should invest in creating informational content. And I tell you why it's driving me crazy, because then I think it's a myopic thinking. Because if we are saying we were just talking about the importance of being a brand, but being a brand is not just because the product is fantastic. You have to also prove that you created the product or that service because you know the things, because you know the pain points of the people you are targeting with those products. And I mean, this is informational content, especially. So you have to occupy the discovery part of a search journey. How can you do it? I mean, you can come out and you can be Steve Jobs popping up in a convention with a brick and say, this is the future. Not everybody know even what is Steve Jobs. So what do you think about this dilemma of creating or not creating, occupying or not occupying the top of the funnel and just concentrating in the commercial, so middle of the funnel, and transactional, bottom of the funnel?
Well, it's funny because I heard an interesting story from my partner who has been a developer and a mobile developer for a very long time. So he was telling me a story, I think yesterday, about Steve Jobs, that Steve Jobs didn't have an iPad in his home. Steve Jobs was not his own target customer. He wanted to sell those into other houses, but like people didn't believe him. Reporters asked him, and he said it was not in his house, and reporters for a long time didn't believe it. But then I believe it was the biographer who came out and said, like, no, he didn't have an iPad in his house. They talked about history and philosophy when he had his dinner parties and he had people over. Like, he was not the target audience. And so yes, I agree that there's a bit of an existential problem at play here where the powers that be are playing a little bit of a game because they have power and authority and they can wield it over us, where it is creating this zero sum stakes game where we are all fighting for a pittance, a tiny piece of an ever shrinking puzzle. The click through rates, the links, the references, the citations in LLMs are minuscule, relatively speaking. And Google's is shrinking. And so I think the web is changing. I also think we as SEOs live in a bubble. So I'm not saying adoption of ChatGPT and other LLMs isn't growing. It is. But I think we also have a viewpoint of it that maybe feels like it's everything in the world to everyone right now when it isn't to everyone. To your point, not everyone uses phones, not everyone uses iPhones. There are exceptions to the rule. Now, if there's enough of those, then that is meaningful. But I don't, frankly, unfortunately, have an answer to the existential problem that we are all facing, which is why are we doing this? Is it worth it for us to do this? Is it worth it for our businesses to do this, or do we focus on other means of visibility, of awareness? Because it is changing. But LLMs have this very interesting line to straddle of like, we're going to kill all the jobs, we're going to kill SaaS, we're going to put all you out of business. But in the meantime, everyone needs to learn this right now and start acting on it right now, or you're going to starve tomorrow. And so this mentality, this starvation they are forcing us all into is a problem, and it might hurt them and it might hurt their growth trajectory. It might not. I think it depends on how you feel about human nature and the nature of how technology evolves and how society evolves. But it does feel like there's just an ever growing chasm of the haves and the have-nots. And I read an excellent article yesterday. Dang it, who shared that? I want to give them credit, but it was such a good read about the class privilege that comes from AI optimism. and how in order to be excited about AI, you need to believe you are part of the class that will benefit. And you will believe that you and probably your future children are not part of the class that will not get hired, laid off.
Mm, yeah,
What are the
yeah, it's something that is a more
a moral
a deeper,
quandary?
yes, a wider, a
So many
deeper
details.
problem. No, 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 it's fine. It's totally fine. I mean, I would spend hours talking in these terms about these things, and I think also that it's a defensive way of thinking. I mean, let's say there are two people. The ones that I call the AI bros, so the ones that want to speculate on the bubble, let's
Uh-huh.
call it, of AI, as much as they can, as in the early 2000, there were the SEO bros that who were speculating before, let's say, Florida update, to everything SEO to earn all the money possible.
Uh-huh.
Then there are people who are really believing that there is a change, because I think that this change of behavior, for instance, in search, was already there. I mean,
Exactly. I very
because
much agree.
the,
It
the
might be
zero,
accelerating it for certain
yeah,
audiences, but
AI
it
is
was there
just igniting it to with turbo
to
velocity.
force us enough to pay attention.
Yeah. And so I think that people who already were aware of this change already somehow created some defensive or proactive ways to surf this change. So
Uh-huh.
how to deal with this. And these are the ones that thinks in terms of positivity. So I'm not an SEO that is always going to be replaced by an AI, for instance. Then there are the ones that were the classic, let's say, working and thinking still in SEO as the 10 blue links, as the keyword targeting, as something like this, or very
Mhm.
basic stuff. These ones,
Vintage SEO.
yeah, well, but more vintage, more in terms of years, more in terms of mentality.
Uh,
The ones that are SEO because they just have read three blog posts and did a short online course about SEO, because this is a problem that always existed in our industry.
because that's where we all start.
Y- Yes, but the problem is that so many of these persons never did what we did, which is
Mhm.
breaking website and hopefully not client's website. But doing experimentation, which is something that, as you were saying, is something that we are restarting to do, especially now with these changes. I always cite the case of Duane Forrester. Duane Forrester is a wonderful man, but he was really silent. But all of a sudden, he started to write Substack post to be present on LinkedIn, to be a voice about all these changes, even published a book. These are the kind, I think, of models of positive thinking about AI. And so I think there is this kind of differentiation. It's like when industrial revolution in the early 19th century, where once the positivists were thinking about the bright future of technology, and the leftists were have all the reason to try to destroy the machines. So we are in that moment. But let's talk. You were saying, okay, you were obviously the models that Google has for AI in search are AI overview, AI mode. We are trying to test in AI mode to highlight better the links, the source link. But did you test it, or are you testing web guide? Because Google is really, really subtly pushing web guide as a test in the main search in the last weeks. Have you had the opportunity to see it or to test it? What is your
That
opinion?
particular one, not yet, because we've been focused on some other big ones that we're closing up for end of year. So I can't speak to that one, unfortunately.
Okay. Somehow, I think that our career in SEO is similar up until one point. You were for many years, like me, a consultant, but
Uh-huh.
then you decide to create your own company, which is
Mm.
something that I also had in the past. Maybe it's time for me to expand, to create, even if it's small, my own SEO agency in order to better serve people, better serve my clients, having people helping me and so on. But then knowing myself, for my own mental health, I decided not to do it
Mm,
because I would have felt the responsibility too much.
mm.
So what instead made you jump the shark and go from freelancer to successful freelancer to the world of an agency?
Such a good question. I think there's a few different pieces here. I think a lot of it was fundamentally driven by what I'm good at and what I care about. And so Simon Sinek, go back to why. My personal why is that I love working on interesting projects and learning new things with people I care about. And so I simply like working as a member of a team. I think I'm better and smarter and more helpful in collaboration than I am in isolation. Yes, there are costs to that. Yes, there is stress. Yes, there is infrastructure. Yes, there are things that I have to sustain and maintain. And there are costs to that, certainly. But to me, those have just been really worthwhile things because it also means I get to collaborate in a more meaningful and ongoing fashion with people that I can learn from and grow from and enjoy. I think it also stems from, frankly, that I just like tackling new challenges. I just want to try new things. As I was a freelancer, when I first went out, I was convinced I was going to be bad at sales and I was convinced I was going to be bad at accounting. Um, as most women do, unfortunately, have this mindset because for whatever societal reason or whatever, I think we've often been told that we just are, and it's uncomfortable, right? How can you do sales if you're worried about people liking you and being nice and all these things that are expected of us? But as it turns out, if I framed sales to myself as I don't need to sell you. I need to tell you what I'm good at and what I'm not good at and help you make a good decision for yourself if I can help you. And so when I frame it as me helping them, even if that solution doesn't end up being me, then I feel like I'm being a good steward of their time and budget. And accounting wise, who knew when you're tracking your own numbers and you're up 36% quarter over quarter, suddenly I really liked maintaining my own books. And so as the company has really evolved and grown, there are new challenges to sit down and figure out each time. And that has been really fascinating to me. So I don't maintain our books at this point because I got it to a place where I knew how to do it. I knew how to stay on top of it. And we were big enough that it made sense for me to tackle new and interesting problems. So I could pay someone else to do that for me. Right. So now I feel informed and on top of it and I don't have to maintain it, and it's the best of both worlds. So I just like that sort of cyclical process of there is a new challenge, I have to figure out how to solve this challenge and then go on to the next one sometimes. And so I think being at this stage enables me to do that thing that I love to do.
Yes, true. Interesting, interesting. And one question about, obviously, from the outside, not as someone. I mean, I've directed, as I was telling you before, off records. I work in television, and when I was working in television, I had a big team under myself and under me, and so I knew how to. But in that case, I wasn't the boss. I mean, I was the leader of a team, which is very different. But since then, I always work solo. So my knowledge of the agency world is more from outside with a different perspective. But
Yep.
also as a judge in many global search award, European search award, and so on. When it happened to me to see the entries for best agency or best small agency, one constant thing that is coming out is how to retain the excellence inside the agency. Because in our world, especially in digital marketing, but I think especially in SEO, the turnover is very big, very, very frequent. So people know how to make people stay, especially the excellence of inside your agency and not going away after a few years, maybe to find to create their own agency, maybe to go solo, maybe to go in-house, or even worse, maybe going to your competitor agency. You, as an agency owner, prioritize this aspect of the agency life.
I'd say, frankly, we have an easier time of this because we're small. We don't have scale. We work primarily with senior people who have learned this, who are curious and who keep up on news because it's interesting and fascinating and because they're personally passionate about it. And so I think it comes naturally to myself and my team. And it doesn't have to scale because we are not big and we can share. So I don't have necessarily answers for you. I mean, other than like I have worked at other agencies, I have supported that. I have trained people and educated people. I've seen and worked as a part of companies where they have monthly meetings, for example. So if someone really is just great at the innovation and the learning piece, they can lead a session about like, here's the news that's relevant and updated. Here's the things you need to know. Because not everyone wants to do that. Some people are really focused on, say, experimentation and being super excellent at that, which probably means you're not in the day to day of every new step in evolution or
Yeah.
whatever it is. Maybe it's in the details of content. Maybe it's getting great at brand. And so you're not on the up and up on what technical SEO is. So I think building in prioritizing it, caring about it, and building in processes in order to do that and leveraging the people on your team that are good at that to bring that insight to people. Uh, I think that's how you accomplish that at scale.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Franco. It's interesting what you said. And somehow it's maybe a big jump, but I don't think it's a big jump because I want to connect these things that you have just said with something that I cited when introducing you. You are really involved with women in tech SEO as a mentor, which is somehow connected to what you have uh, already said somehow. So independently from the organization, in your case is Women in Tech, how much is important for senior SEO to have a mentor mentality in order to educate the younger generation in order to not, okay, usually we say that from failures you can learn, but I mean, there are some kind of mistakes that we can also teach people do not commit. So this is to mentor this younger generation to learn in the correct way. How much is important and how much is rewarding in your case?
I mean, it's almost hard to say because I think it is so inherently built into my DNA. I mean, I think because of my learning and growing experience. I come from the startup world where there's a lot of like sink or swim, push you in the pool and see what happens. Like she'll figure it out or she won't. And so that was a frustrating experience to me. And I spent too long kind of beating my head against the wall and just trying to invent things. And that was not a bad I learned from that. I grew from that, and I was able to succeed in that environment, but that doesn't mean that's what I think is the good or right or best or most or frankly most effective way for people to learn. So that felt important to me to help people grow. And so I personally really focus on that. Not I think there's a lot of amazing content on the internet for helping people learn SEO. So beyond the use case you were mentioning earlier of you read 3 blogs and you took a course and now you're an expert, I think there's plenty of people that are 2, 3, 4 years into their career. They're learning about the different facets. Maybe they're specializing in this thing versus another, and they're more there's just more content, there's more information available for entry level SEO. There is much less available for people moving from beginner to intermediate
Yeah,
and then subsequently from intermediate to and then I'd even say like from senior to like developer level of like expertise, because I don't think SEOs need to be developers. You synthesize, can you use, can you understand that context? So that's where I personally enjoy because that's where I had pain and I want to help people make that with less pain, that transition, right? And so I do think it's critically important. And frankly, I think it's going to be more and more critically important over time, thanks to AI.
yeah.
Because what's not happening is, should the news stories be true, if juniors aren't getting hired, where is our next cohort of intermediate and senior level people? Where are they going to come from? Someone's going to need to train them and talk
Well,
to
maybe we are going to just to put it as a joke in the classic. job posting, meaning we are looking for SEO with, let's say, 20 years, but with 10 years of experience. So this kind of absolute situation. But I really, really, really like what you were pointing out about mentorship is especially important for the changing moments of a career of someone because, yes,
Mhm.
everybody can learn how to start in SEO, but when you want to decide what I want to be when I grow as an SEO, that is important because it's also a life changing somehow decision that someone can have because someone can maybe say, okay, let's go everything with local search and then discover that local search is not for you or for her. Or let's go with this kind of specialization. Or let's go broader, not really specialized in anything. Go with strategic SEO, growth, and so on. And so this is something that is going to determine you as a worker, as a professional, and also you as a person in terms of how you are able to combine the satisfaction of the work you do, the satisfaction and felicity you have in your own life.
Yeah, I very much agree.
Because nothing is sadder than doing a job that you don't like, but not
Mhm.
having the opportunity to reframe yourself or not knowing how to reframe yourself from that first mistake that you did because you had no someone counseling you about the
Mhm.
decision. I think that this is really important. And this is maybe sometimes the things that when we talk about mentorship, something that is somehow not ignored, but not considered as maybe the most important thing. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we're all learning.
Yeah. Oh,
I
yes.
am
Totally.
also a
Totally.
mentee sometimes, right? Like,
No.
we all need context. We all need a broader point of view. We all need to grow in this or that way. And why not help each other along the way?
Yes. I used to say, as Socrates was saying, that I know that know nothing. But anybody having me as a contact in LinkedIn can see that sometimes I comment as if I was the newbie of the world to, I don't know, let's
Mm,
say something super technical that someone like, for instance, Dan Petrovich is sharing about what is testing in AI models and so on. And I asked him question as if I was at 13 years old SEO starting the job in that moment because I don't understand anything of what he says. So I
mm,
need him to please explain me as if I was totally ignorant because I had.
huh.
So
I
sometimes
think that's
very,
a superpower,
yeah, but I
honestly,
think
like,
that
being able
very,
to be vulnerable to ask those questions because I think they're important, and I think there's a lot more people that don't know those things than are willing to admit. So being a model,
well, I
that's
don't do
important,
it because I want to be a model, but I think that
and to learn.
if it also has that effect, I'm happy. But sincerely, I do it because I'm ignorant in many things. So I'm really, really open to learn from anyone, everything. And if I have to give also a suggestion to all the people listening and watching to us, don't frame yourself into only SEO knowledge, marketing knowledge. Start to discover other fields of knowledge because everything return also in your job, in your mental framework when you're working.
Yeah,
So
I'm with you.
1 hour, 1 hour. I mean, whew, very, very. Let's stop talking about SEO. Let's talk just a last question about you. Before, when we were preparing this registration, this episode, I was saying to you, but it seems from what I see, you lived in many places.
Mhm.
So I wanted to ask you a curiosity: what you take home as your best memory, but also affection about the
Mhm.
places that you have lived
Hmm.
during in your sort of pilgrimage between one coast to the other, from the north to the south of North America.
Fascinating question. I think I've really enjoyed the opportunity to meet new people because there's places I fit in more than other places, just like anyone else, and that me, frankly, a lot of comfort and joy to know that sometimes you're stuck because you're stuck, and maybe you can find new places where you belong, and maybe you do have value that you don't understand,
Mm.
I think it's also been an interesting opportunity to learn and grow within myself, to reinvent myself each time and decide what's important to me and to break bad habits. Because it can be hard to break habits. It can be so hard when people expect you to be a certain way because that's when you've been that way. So when you're ready to learn and grow, it can be a really powerful way to reset, and be free to become who you want to be next. I have been fortunate to live several places. And I mean, there's downsides to that too, frankly, because then I have friends in all sorts of different places that are time and effort and worth it, don't get me wrong, to keep up with. But then I have to do that each time. So like building my community, building my people that feel close. And I can do that digitally and I can do that online, but there's really nothing that can replace like someone to go get a beer with and complain to when
Exactly.
you need to,
Yeah.
right? Like that's such a human need. And I think it's important to balance both, but I've had a lot of joy and experience and learning from all the different places I've been fortunate to be.
Cool. Nice, nice. Thank you, Tori. It was a real
Thank you.
pleasure to share this hour conversating with you. I hope
Same.
in the future to have a new conversation and let's see what AI is brought to us.
Yes.
And okay, thank you again, Tori, and thank to all of you people for being our guest too. Remember to ring on the bell. I know this is the influencer moment. Ring on the bell and subscribe to the channel and to make us grow and to be notified when another fantastic episode of this session is going to be broadcast. Take care and ciao ciao.